Welcome back to my Macros for Writers course. Today I'm going to show you how to exert more detailed control over the location of your cursor in a word macro. Now, what will that do for you? Basically, it'll allow you to streamline your editing by using the keyboard more for some of your basic document navigation. Now, specifically, we're going to be creating two practical macros today, the first of which will be to jump to a local punctuation mark. Now, trust me, that's more useful than it sounds like, and if you practice it, you'll see what I mean. The second will allow you to jump to the nearby heading. So I'll create a new macro here. What I'm going to do is come down here to the record button on the status bar. Click that, it brings up my record macro window. Now I have talked about these dialog boxes in more detail in previous videos. Please look at that if you want a slower introduction to this. So I'm going to type go to next comma test. Now I'll select keyboard because I want to create a keyboard shortcut. It'll bring up this dialog box and I select press new shortcut key and type. Now I use control comma. You can use whatever you wish. I'll use control comma for searching forward and alt comma for searching backward. That's just kind of what works for me. It'll be kind of depend on your preferences there. Then I choose assign, and we can see in the current keys here, sure enough, it's listed right there now. Click close, and there I have my macro. Now I'll come back here because I actually want an empty macro here so I can fill it myself. I'll actually click stop on the status bar. You can use the view menu under macros and do this through the ribbon, but I find it easier just to use that little button on the status bar. Okay, let's get to that macro first. We press Alt F11 or Option F11 on a Mac to jump to the macro editor. And here we create a macro called go to next comma. Now I'm appending test to mine just because I don't want to overwrite my version. So you call it what you want. I'm going to type selection because that's the object we're going to be using. Now, as a reminder, the selection is the thing in Word VBA that kind of encapsulates the properties and actions you can take with the actual selection you see on the screen. Whether or not there's actually a box drag there, your insertion point is an actual selection. Now for the command, this one's actually very short and sweet, still useful. We'll actually come back to it later and make some improvements, but for now, we type move until. Now, what in the world is that doing? That's basically telling VBA to move my current cursor position. That's your little I bar where your text goes, and to move it until it finds a particular character. Now, how do I specify those characters? I type CSAT colon equals, and for me, I'm going to put a comma there. Now that CSAT, this is where it starts looking a little more like a programming language. Try to take it in slow steps if that's kind of a fearful thing to you. But CSAT is character set. It's just a short way of writing that. The colon equals is basically doing an assignment, saying, set the character set to whatever I'm putting in my quotes here. Now, quote there, I'll get to the quotes. It's actually called a string. I'll get to that later in another lesson. For now, I'm just putting the comma inside a pair of quotes to tell the character set, this is my character. I could be more general here. I could actually include colon, semicolon, period, exclamation point, question mark. I could include any characters there I want. Right now, I'm kind of thinking punctuation mark styles, but I just want the comma right now. So let me come back to this command a little bit. It literally means move until you encounter whatever characters are listed in this character set inside those quotes after that colon equals, after that assignment. That's all this is doing. Okay, let's come back here to the document and see what it does. I'm at a roughly random position in this document. I'm going to press control comma because that's what I assigned it to. And sure enough, boom, it jumps to that first comma. Now, this is a little innocuous, innocent looking. I'm not going to say it's going to change your world, your writing world, but there's a lot of times you do want to jump to a comma. And rather than having to move your hand to the mouse or tap control right, left arrow, you can just hit control comma, boom, it jumps right there. Now, of course, that can be easily tweaked to kind of meet your own personal preferences, and I encourage you to do so. Now, a quick note on what this move until command is not. It's not a find and replace type operation. That's a separate thing, and we'll go over that in a future lesson. It actually searches for the first occurrence of any of the characters in the list. For example, I go back to that macro and replace the comma with the word new. Back in my main document, you can see on one line below my current, there is the word new. But if I run this macro, it stops on the first occurrence of an E. If N had been the first occurrence, it would have stopped at the first in. So it's looking for any of those characters, not the set of characters. Now, if I want to write the macro to do the opposite, go to the previous comma, I come over here. Now, unfortunately, there's a better way to do this, but unfortunately, we just have to create a kind of a fresh macro here. So we come over and write, go to previous comma test. Click the keyboard, and I've actually already created it, but I'm going to repeat it. Type Alt, comma, and the press new shortcut key, assign, and it creates the current key assignment for that shortcut. Click close. I'm going to stop the recording because I want to type my own command. Come back to my VBA editor. Insert a blank line after those green comment characters, comment lines. I'll copy the command from the previous macro down to this one since we're doing exactly the same thing except moving backwards in the document. Then I'll add a comma in preparation for the parameter that tells the command which direction to go. And I can type, I use the count parameter. We actually have encountered that before in previous lessons, and I can use a constant WD backward. Count equals WD, colon equals WD backwards. That's going to tell it to search backwards. Now, if I come back to my document here, now I went to kind of a new position here. So I have commas on both sides. I can press Control, comma. It'll jump to the right one. Now I want to do the backwards one. So I'll press Alt, comma, and it jumps to the previous comma, just like I wanted. Now, there is kind of a small gotcha. Honestly, this one's not that big of a deal, but if I do happen to have a starting selection, then the search for will actually start from the end of my selection. For example, here I have this text selected. If I press Control, comma, it jumps to the comma down in the next heading section because it starts from kind of the end of that selection. Similarly, if I were to have this selected, I press Alt, comma, it will jump to the comma from the beginning of the selection. Not a big deal. If you like that, then you're done. If you don't like that and you want to kind of have a little more control so that it doesn't act a little spurious, a little strange to you, depending on what you're expecting, you can start out by collapsing your selection. So we go back to the macro and I insert a new line above that move until command. And I literally just type selection dot collapse. Now I can copy and paste that down to the other macro. And now when I run these macros, I can come here, have my selection made here. I press Control, comma, and it operates as expected. It collapses that selection first and then moves as if it was starting from the beginning of the selection. I personally like that, but it's kind of whatever your preference is. So these two macros are really my final versions. I always try to show you my final versions after I've been talking to you for a while, but that is the final version of each of these macros. The only thing I would do different is I would actually insert a different comment just to kind of explain what's going on. So the next macro is pretty short and sweet. Also, we'll create a new macro, go down here to the status bar and click the record button on the macro. We'll type this one as go to next heading test. Click the keyboard button so we can assign a shortcut to it. Under press new shortcut key edit box, I'll press Control Alt down arrow. So you can see mine's actually already assigned to one. Go to heading level next current. That's just my version. I've got some little details in there. So I'm actually going to overwrite that for now. So click assign. It shows up in the current keys. Then I click close. Now, I actually want the empty macro with just the shortcut assigned right now, so I'll click stop on my macro recording. I don't want to record any steps. Come over here to my VBA editor, add a new empty line, and hit tab. Now I'm ready. I have my go to next heading test macro. Now, this one's a little different. We're still using the selection object. So we'll type selection. Now, I want to go to next. Now, I told you that VBA really strives to be pretty English-like, and notice here we had move until, go to next. These are commands that really just, you don't have to really be a programmer so much to actually use them. That's one of the things I like about VBA. So how do we go to the heading? Well, we have to put another parameter in here. We type what. So this is where we tell the command, this is what I want you to jump to. There's a whole list of things. We are going to use WD go to heading. Now, the WD in the beginning is just a prefix to indicate it's a word constant. It's a constant, means heading. So that what parameter there, that parameter, it specifies literally what I'm going to jump to. There's actually a bunch of different things I can do. I can go to a line, a page, a bookmark, a comment, actually spelling error, grammar error. Each of these has their own separate constant depending on what you're wanting to write your macro to do. That actually is about all there is to it right now. So if I come back to my document and I want to go to my next heading, this is going to the next one down, I'm going to press Control Alt down arrow, and sure enough, it jumps to that next heading. Now, just a little caveat here. This one will go to the regular heading styles, heading 1, heading 2, heading 3, and so forth. If you're using derived styles like I do, in my books, I have scene headings. I kind of pseudo outline as I'm going. I write and I put subheadings and headings in, even chapters. I have to use a slightly different method from my derived headings. At least last time I checked, it didn't work. This works just fine for regular headings. Now, what about going back to the previous heading? I have to come down here and start a new macro. So this one I'll call go to previous heading. Click the keyboard button, and I'm going to assign this one the Control Alt up arrow. Click assign. You can see it's assigned now to Control Alt up arrow, and click close. I stop the macro recording again because I want to type my own command, and then come over here to my macro. Add a new blank line. We've done this a few times now, and hit tab. That just kind of spaces it out. And I'm going to type selection. We're using the selection object a lot. So I'll have selection here. Now this time I'm going to type go to previous. Now again, what? Same as before. And I'm going to do the same go to heading. There, save that. Control S to save. Come over here to my main document. Here I am in a kind of my regular starting position, Control Alt up arrow, and it jumps to the previous heading. Now that's the literal previous heading from me being in the body text. If I want to go to the previous heading, I can hit it again and it goes up to the one before that. Now this is something I want to use more often. I have more trouble remembering that I've created than actually using it. It actually works kind of nice. So a little embarrassed to say I'm not using this one as much as I should from my little pulpit here, but I have got myself to use it some, and it's kind of nice. It's nice to be able to jump around locally without having to shift my hand to the mouse. Now, for our course macros, this actually is the final version. I don't have to make any adjustments. The only thing I would do different again maybe would be to insert some extra comments to kind of explain what's going on if I were to come back to this months later or something. But that really is the final version of the macro. Now, like I said, my version adds some tweaks to it. I can use it with general styles and such, but that's not for today's lesson. So try that, see if you like it. Let me know in the comments if you do. I'd be interested. Now, I don't actually have any exercises today. I felt like anything I would do would be trivial extensions of this, just going to a different punctuation mark or something. So you get off today. I know it, no homework, right? But do follow up. I have some lessons later. I'll give you some exercises with some more substantial things, or you can go back to the exercises you might have skipped in a previous lesson. Now, what I'm trying to do here is to get you to use your keyboard more often, because as I've talked about in previous videos, your keyboard, your hands are right there already. And when you shift your hand over to the mouse, it's a little slower. It may not feel like it while you're doing things and you're clicking, but if you actually measure it out, and I actually have a video where I showed an example of this. I had a bunch of mouse edits, and I did the same edits with the keyboard shortcuts that I've written, and it was dramatically faster to use the keyboard. Now, that's not to say the mouse doesn't have its place. Of course, I use the mouse, and it's definitely useful for more random edits, but the keyboard should be utilized more by writers than it is. All right, thank you for joining me today. If you spent the time going all the way to the end of this video, let me say a personal thank you to you. You're making my time here worthwhile, and I appreciate it. Catch up with the other lessons if you skipped some. I do have more lessons coming. We'll try to take you up to where you can write some pretty substantial macros by the time we're done. So that's several lessons down the road. I hope you're enjoying this. Let me know in the comments if you are. Maybe hit the like button if that's your kind of thing. Thank you for joining me, and I'll see you in a different lesson. If you're interested in more, one of the extra videos here should be the next lesson in the series. And other one, a random video YouTube thinks you're interested in. Keep studying, keep learning. Use this stuff. It actually will help.